Section 8.1 is on multiplying and dividing rational expressions. The one thing that students probably get confused the most about is the difference between terms and factors. So I have a little talk right here going on what factors are versus what terms are. Basically, in a nutshell, factors are things that are multiplied. So in this case, A times B times C, those are all factors. A plus B plus C, those are all terms. Anything added or subtracted is a term. As long as you're multiplying things, those things are factors. Whatever you're adding are terms. For example, this polynomial right here, quadratic polynomial, are three terms. There are three terms here. Sure, there's factors within a term, but they're still terms, okay? If I were to factor that out, now there are two factors. There are terms within the factor, but x plus 6 is one factor. X plus 1 is one factor. Anything that's multiplied like this to get you the original is considered a factor. Simplifying fractions. Where does this come into play? Okay, when you simplify fractions, you need to be able to factor those fractions. Okay, so for example, if I'm going to take 15 divided by 75, most of us would do this a little differently because they're just numbers, but this is basically what we're doing. If we take 15 and we factor it, it's 3 times 5. We try to get them down into prime factors if possible. 75 is 3 times 25, which is 5 times 5. So right now we have a 3 and a 5 factor on the top. We have a 3, 5, and a 5 on the bottom. Don't forget, we always have a 1 up top if we need it. And in this case, we will. So right now, if I have 3, 5, and 1 factors on the top, 3, 5, and 5 factors on the bottom, any factors that are like make 1. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So I'm left with 1 over 5. So if I wanted to simplify this fraction, I would simplify it down to 1/5. Okay, so let's just do one more real quick. This one here, I have 2 cubed. This one here, I believe, is 2 squared times 3 cubed. It's 4 times 27. 4 is 2 squared, 3 cubed. As long as my bases are the same, we can simplify. We've got 2 2's here, we've got 3 here, leaving me with 1 up top. So that's a 2 on the top and a 27 on the bottom. So we've canceled like factors. All right, in example 1a, they've already kind of factored it for us. 4 is a factor. If I put a times sign in between, it's a factor. Y is a factor. Y minus 3 is a factor. Y plus 4 is a factor. The denominator has a y. It also has, if I factor this out, if I can, I have a y minus 3 and a y plus 2. Okay, now that I've factored this further, I can see that I have like factors. I have y and y. I have a y minus 3 and a y minus 3. That leaves me with 4y plus 4 on the top, because I have a 4 left and a y plus 4, and it leaves me with a y plus 2 on the bottom. Okay? So you have to be able to factor things. And we spent a lot of time on factoring back in chapter 4 and 5. So hopefully you can get back there if you need to and refresh your memory on how to factor out polynomials. All right, the next one. We have a 2 times a z times a z plus 5, and this one actually, I believe, factors further into a z plus 4 and a z minus 2. So I've just factored that further. This one's already factored. I have a z minus 1, z plus 5, and a z minus 2. So what we're going to do is simplify anything that's like top and bottom. And that's it. So I'm left with a 2z on the top and a z plus 4 and a z minus 1 on the bottom. Now, why can't I divide or simplify this z with this z? And that's where a lot of people make mistakes. They try to simplify a term with a factor, and that doesn't work, obviously. So this z is not a factor. It is a part of a factor. It's not the full factor. So you cannot cancel that z with the z on the top. Okay? This is where you're going to have to check your answers diligently to make sure you're doing things correctly. All right, example 2. When is a fraction undefined? Well, we should know this, that a fraction is undefined when the denominator equals 0. Well, when is this denominator equal to 0? Well, if we factor it and set it equal to 0, we'll know. And so I know this is negative 6 times my factors are x minus 5 plus 2. So when is this equal to 0? When is the denominator equal to 0? Well, it's when x is equal to 5 and negative 2. So my answer is it's undefined when x is equal to 5 and negative 2. Now, even though one of those factors may cancel out with the top, you still have to take into account when you're finding your undefined variables. So let's just try this for example. If I have x, let's see if this factors here. X, let's see, 12 would be 6 and 2, so plus 2 plus 6. Even though the x plus 2's, cancel, that x plus 2 is still down there. It's just, it turns to 1, but it's still there. And so you still have to take into account that factor when you're finding your undefined values of x. All right, let's go to 3a. We're basically just going to do the same thing. We're going to take and factor the top, factor the bottom. So if I factor the top, it looks like I have a z common factor, x minus 4. I have a z here, another z, because it's z squared, and a 4 minus x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out a negative 1 out of that and make it into a x minus 4. If I take a negative out of positive 4, I get a negative 4, and a negative out of a negative x gives me a positive x. So I know these eliminate, so do these. It leaves me with 1 over negative z, or just negative 1 over z. That is my simplified fraction. Again, just factor and eliminate like factors. If the factors are kind of opposite each other, take out a negative 1. And then you can make them the same. But the negative 1 is still in your answer. Okay, this one we have, take out an AB. We are left with a B minus 5. This one we have a B plus 5. I switched it around and it doesn't matter. I mean, 5 plus B is the same as B plus 5. This one I'm going to take out a negative 1 and make that a B minus 5. Now these cancel out. The B's don't cancel, so that stays the way they are. So it'd be a negative AB over B plus 5. And that is example 3. The next video we're going to talk about is the multiplying and dividing fractions.